Hi guys, good morning, and today we're going to talk about variables. So anyone here knows what variable is? Nope, no one? Alright, so that's great because that's what I'm going to teach you. Variables. So the meaning of variables is basically a name storage that allows you to store information. So for example, you have your identification number.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
Alright, and that's how you do the sorting bubble algorithm from scratch by reverse the binary tree with the recursion. And that's about it. So any questions here? Any more questions before I end this lecture? No one? No one at all about any questions about this? Alright, so you guys are very smart because you don't have any questions. So I assume that you probably understand and remembered all of what I have said in the past 2 hours. That's it for today. Next week we're going to have a test on literally what I've said just now. Alright, thank you. Have this happened to you listening to a monotonous lecture? And the thing is, I would assure you that this thing is happening around the world daily. And especially in this time where we are using Zoom calls to listen to our lectures. Is really studying a degree really worth it? But that's not the point of this video. So what is the best way for you to learn coding, programming, or actually anything? So I want to bring up this chart. So this chart is called the learning pyramid, or some call it cone of learning. I rather call it the learning pyramid. So this popular learning pyramid is created by the National Training Laboratories in Bethel, Maine in the 1960s. That's around 60 years ago. That's pretty long. But before I'm going to explain on this learning pyramid, I want to disclaim that this is just a theory. This is not a source of truth. So take this theory with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of studies that also rebuts or tries to debate on this theory. Some say that it is not accurate, some say it is almost accurate, some say that it is just a whole of baloney or bull. However, that is how I'm going to structure this video, from the top to the bottom. And also I want to explain in terms of coding, because I myself have taught coding and see the effects of whether this different method actually works. Is it effective? Is it not effective? And whatnot. The first one is lecture. That is the most basic way for you to transmit your information from your mouth to the ears of the students. So imagine yourself in your previous school lecture hall where you sit down and really listen to the lecturer, teacher, or even your professor in a certain topic. Let's give it a topic of variables. Do you think that it is the most effective way for you to learn through a lecture? Is everyone really listening to the lecture? And does everyone understand what is the lecturer trying to teach? Well, for myself, I personally think that it is not the most effective. But what if the lecture was on a video, for example on YouTube? And what if the lecture wasn't being taught by your lecturer in your school, but someone who's very good at explaining, or someone who actually loves teaching? Would you rather listen from that person? I would definitely listen. Having a lecture is better than having no lectures. There are tons of research that says that if there was no lectures, then students are not able to learn anything. And that, I would say, is the most basic way for you to transmit information from one human to another or to many. So does going to the lecture hall, listening to the professor talking about variables in a monotonous kind of voice helps? No. However, if you were to listen to the same lecture with a better lecturer who's more enthusiastic about the job in explaining you what is variables, would you listen to it? Probably yes. And the thing is, some people might not be able to understand. So having it on YouTube allows us to keep track on what we are able to understand. If you think that the speed of the lecture is too slow, you can 2 times the speed on YouTube. And if you don't understand a certain jargon that a lecturer has said earlier, then you can pause the video and then you can go to Google and then you can see the definition of what the jargon is. And there's so many definitions that you can find on the internet. And the thing is, you can't do that on an actual physical lecture because you're going to sit down and when the lecture just goes on and on and on, and then you don't understand and it gets very boring and then you tend to sleep and then you tend to do other things. And that's the ineffective way for you, or the most effective way for any students to not actually learn anything. Even though it is better than nothing, I would say that's not the best way for you to learn anything. If you really want to have a lecture, if you really want to have a person on the lecture stage and to talk to many students, then I think the best way to do it is to do questions and answer. So for example, if I were the lecturer, I would say, hey students, I need you to go and watch this video about variables. So you have any questions about jargons or what the video is all about, then you can post it on, for example, a Google Doc, and then I'm going to create a lecture around the questions that the students have posted. So with this, the lecturer will know what the students understand, what the students don't understand, and what the students are interested. For me, there are 2 types of questions that students usually ask. The first is they ask a question because they really don't know what the jargon or word or concept is. So the job of the lecturer or teacher is to break down those complicated concepts into something relatable and simple to understand. Most of the time, the jargons that we use, we think that it is makes sense, common sense to us, something that we understand. Sometimes we overestimate how much the students are able to understand what we are trying to talk about. The second type of question what a student normally asks is out of curiosity. So for example, a student will ask, so when are we going to use variables in real life? So for example, a variable in real life is when you, for example, have a journal. So the concept of a variable is basically having information at a named storage. So a journal is a very good example because you have a book with your name on it. And then inside this journal, it has information about you, about your reflections on the day. And then you can modify the information, but the name of the storage remains the same because it's a named journal. So with this, people get, oh, now I get it. Variables not only is present on computers, but also present in real life. But what about computers? When are we going to use variables? Then you could say that when you want to enter into Facebook, what does it require? A username. So how are you going to take the username into the server to authenticate? In the simplest form, you probably have to create a variable that is named username with your information, for example, your name, Happy Haris. And then it will be assigned to the variable name, username, and then it will be sent to the server to authenticate. The server will then say, okay, to authenticate, I require the username. So it sees a variable username, and then it will take in the information inside the variable and see whether Happy Haris is found in the database. So that's kind of an example of how you can explain variables in real life, trying to be as simple as possible. So in summary, I would say that having to listen passively to a lecture is really bad. But if you are able to make it into a Q&A and something relatable and hopefully a little bit engaging during the lecture, people will not dread going to the lecture but be happy going to the lecture. So by reading on information, let's go into the next method of learning, which is reading. So this is just my opinion and my view about reading. I would say a lecture is way better than reading. The thing is, the only time reading is better than having a lecture is that if you don't have an opportunity to go on a lecture to ask the professor any questions. So reading is the next form of learning, and I would say is the easiest way for you to learn anything, whether it's coding or what not. So reading is basically having a book and then just read it. You either passively read it or you actually internalize of what you're actually reading. And I would say personally, lecture should be the second one rather than reading. So in a programmer's life, we have to do a lot of reading. We have to read a lot on the documentation. And the thing is, I would say not a lot of documentations are beginner friendly, and we have to probably ask a teacher to explain how to read a documentation. So in terms of programmers, we probably have a lot of experience reading the documentation because we have experience in learning what the different jargons are talking about and how the different structures of the documentation is talking about. Have you read the freaking documentation? Any documentation, right, I would say requires a level of experience for you to understand. If I were to be a beginner and I were to read the documentation, for example, Flutter or Dart, I wouldn't understand the whole thing. But in order for you to understand, you need some experience, and that's where lecture really comes in, where someone explains to you what the different documentation is talking about. And then if I were to talk about schools where you have the different textbooks are always updated yearly. And it is good to learn at the standpoint of like, oh, I'm reading for fun's sake. But if you want to apply it to real life and you really want to get the up-to-date kind of information, textbook is the worst place for you to read something. I wouldn't say having no textbook is better, but I would say that textbook is not the best way for you to learn the most updated information, because research and information are always getting updated. There will be new discoveries, there will be new information, there will be new concepts that helps us learn on the most up-to-date kind of information. However, like I always say, it always depends on what your current situation is. So if your situation is that if you have a computer and a working internet, textbook can just be online. There are tons of online articles, online books, and online videos that you can get updated with. So reading, I would say personally, should be the #1 least effective way for you to learn, but it's the most accessible way because you can go to a library, and if you have the internet, it is bombarded with information for you to read. So with that said, let's get on to the next method, which is called audio visual. So there isn't like a definition of what audio visual is all about. So what I have to come in terms with is video. So audio visual means you hear and you see. So let's combine it together now to make it video, because in terms of learning coding or programming, we tend to watch videos most of the time. Tutorials are mostly on videos, and then if you want to learn a simple concept, for example, an algorithm or sort bubble algorithm, then you probably watch a video. But if you were to read about it, do you think you will understand better rather than watching on a video? I think not, because watching a video on how it sorts the bubble makes it visually appealing, first of all, so you get interested, and second of all, then people will actually understand how a sorting bubble algorithm works. So you see different videos on YouTube trying to visualize all the different algorithms out there. And the thing is, back in the days when YouTube wasn't available, how did the people learn algorithms? They visualize it in their mind. So the only way they are able to do that is to imagine. And now we have the advantage of videos and audio visuals or whatever we're able to take advantage with. And I think video is the most accessible when you have a computer and a laptop. And nowadays, with the power of editing, you can edit animations, you can add in visual effects, you can add in acting like earlier in this video to make it more engaging, so people will actually go through the whole video and understand better. And the thing about the internet, it democratized information, so we can get the best video throughout the many years that we will go through as a human civilization. So sometimes you see videos that are 5 years old and it explains way better than our current lecturer right now. And that's why I really like video. And no matter whether it's on YouTube or Udemy, this is a great way for you to just do a follow along tutorial, and then it also has visuals that really makes it appealing and helps us go through the whole course of curriculum. So universities can learn a thing or two about YouTube channels out there. Most of the time, the people who explain very well are people who are not really lecturers, but people who really cares about the students' well-being or understanding. Imagine in schools, instead of the teacher who is teaching, we have the best person, the best video teaching us a concept, and then we get excited to watch videos and at the same time maybe have activities to reinforce what we have learned. Wouldn't that be a better future? And that's what I'm trying to do. So videos is a better way for you to actually learn passively. In order for you to make use of videos very well, you have to apply it. So that leads me to the next method, which is called demonstration or whatever. So demonstration, there's two types, offline and online. And I think we have been used to online demonstration. So for example, we watch a video tutorial on how to create a variable on Dartpad, for example. So a person would explain, oh, go to dartpad.com and then type in this statement, var num equal to 1 semicolon. So that's how you create a simple variable inside Dart. So in order for you to actually apply what you have learned, then you have to follow along. So that is the simple example of what a demonstration is. Therefore, I would say audio, visual, or videos will go hand in hand with demonstration. So how about offline? So offline usually comes with physical activities such as sports or cooking. But nowadays, you can literally watch someone cook or someone run. And the thing is, with offline demonstration, that means you require some money and time and effort for you to actually look at the expert in doing it and try to emulating it. So the thing is, you probably have to practice by doing it after the lesson to master it, which I'm going to explain later in this video. But for now, having demonstration most of the time is usually online, because in order for you to get the expert, for example, if you want to create a good burger, you probably want to learn from a person like Gordon Ramsay, where he has been an expert for a very, very long time, rather than some amateur who is there and then trying to figure out how to cook a burger. You rather watch someone, and it's cheap. It's available anytime, anywhere, at any place. So that's the beauty of online demonstration. So the next one is discussion. So I wouldn't say this is like a next tier, but this is just another form of learning. So discussion is to stimulate student thinking and articulation of ideas related to a topic. So there are some research that talks about it where there's only slight retention or advantage when you were to do discussion. And I want to bring up another form of teaching or another way for you to learn, which is cooperative learning. This is where, from the research called the learning pyramid, does it point teachers to the right direction? It's more towards like group work. So there's a study that shows that cooperative learning with group processing was more effective than cooperative learning without group processing. That means you probably go into the group, and then if you were to follow instructions, there isn't a lot of learning. But if you were to go into a group and then you were to do your own kind of learning where each of you discuss about the topic that you want to teach, for example, variables, and then this actually makes you retain the information much longer. So from the research also saying that cooperative learning without group processing was more effective than individualistic learning. So I believe that cooperative learning is the best way for you to learn, because first of all, humans love human interaction, and second of all, that means you are able to play a part, feel belonged in a group, and you will actually retain more information when you are inside a group work. So with this cooperative learning, it requires physical space. So you really have to be there in order for you to make use of the advantage of the cooperative learning. However, in coding, I wouldn't say there's a lot of ways for you to do cooperative learning. But for example, if you want to do, for example, Git reviews, I think that will be a very good cooperative learning. But if you want to explore different concepts like variables, strings, functions and whatnot, and then you research on the different examples that you want to showcase, I think that will be a very good idea on how to do it. So with this cooperative learning, can you reach a level of mastery? Maybe not, because I think cooperative learning helps in terms of engagement, which helps in terms of retention of information. But the best way for you to do it is actually by practicing it. The next method is practice by doing. So this is when you apply what you have learned. So this is when it is very effective for people who are trying to learn programming, because programming is very, very different than actually typing in a sentence. A sentence in code is very different from an English sentence. So you probably have to relearn on how to write an actual sentence for code, and then at the same time you have to keep on doing it because it doesn't really make sense. But the more you do it, the more you get comfortable doing it. So sometimes, for example, in Python, not a lot of beginners understand how the indentation works. So sometimes if they were to do an if statement and if they don't indent it, then there is an error. Then this will take some time for them to understand, oh, Python is very, very anal in terms of indentation. So I have to make sure that the indentation is necessary when it's needed. So there is another type of practice by doing, it's called discovery learning, which I have no idea about. So the definition is trying to learn by giving context, which I really don't understand. But for example, if I were to teach variables, I will probably start off on why we need to learn variables in programming. And then I can give real life examples and examples that we are going to use later on. And once I've said that, then we can do the practice which we are able to demonstrate. And then after that, I'm going to give them certain exercise for them to do the same thing. The more you do it, the more comfortable you are doing it, and then you wouldn't have a higher chance of getting errors by creating a simple variable. And lastly, the last method that retains a lot of information is teaching. So teaching is something that I personally think that everyone should do if they really want to master something. So for example, if you want to master Flutter or Dart or programming or even anything like rock climbing or whatever, right? By teaching, you actually reinforce what you have learned. So by teaching a concept, that means you really put in a lot of experience, effort, and really hopefully research on what you're actually teaching about. So for example, for myself, if I were to teach or share about my opinions, I would do research, not a lot, but enough research for me to get my point of view across. So in terms of teaching, the only way students teach other students is by tutoring. And the thing is, there isn't a lot of literature and research articles on the effects on the tutors. Most of the time is on the impact of the tutees, the receiving end. There isn't a lot of research on the tutor or the teacher end. But for myself personally, I think by teaching a concept, you actually have to learn the concept very well, because in order for you to teach, you have that pressure for you to really know your shit. But at the same time, you also don't know your shit when somebody asks a question that you never thought somebody asked. And that's when you gain more confidence in your certain topic. For example, for me, I really want to master the fundamentals of programming, and that will really help someone to be more confident in learning programming in other concepts or in other programming languages. There was a study on the effectiveness of retention when someone teaches. So in this research or study, after 1 month, they are able to retain the information they have taught. However, it is important to note that both of the groups, the tutor and the tutee, were given training on this strategy on how to teach each other. So tutoring was not the initial learning experience for the tutors. Instead, it was an opportunity to overlearn the strategy by teaching it. In summary, I would say the best way for you to learn Flutter, Dart, coding or whatever is a combination of all these things. If you were to ask me specifically on coding, then I would say that you probably have to watch a video tutorial or a video that's explained by someone who really knows their shit. And then second one is to follow along a tutorial and really type down and practice by doing it. And lastly, if you really want to master it, then that's where teaching comes in, where you have to reinforce what you have learned and also take in the feedback and questions from the students you are teaching from. And that's where you actually build up your confidence and the knowledge base that you have on a certain topic that you want to master. So that's about it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want more of this video, subscribe down below and comment down what is the best way for you to learn coding. That's about it. Stay safe and all the best. Bye bye.